Masechet Nedarim, Daf Yod Gimel. Yesterday, Rami Bar Chama asked a question about a language of a vow. Does it apply to a current state or to a previous state of the thing that you're comparing it to? So if you have a piece of meat in front of you that's Korban Shelemah, and it's permitted, it's after the blood was sprinkled, so this piece of meat is permitted. And I have some bread, and I say this bread will be like the Korban Shelemah. So does that, on the one hand, not take effect? Because that meat is permitted, so therefore I'm only saying that this bread will be permitted, so that does not make any prohibition, and therefore the bread remains permitted. Or when I say this bread will be like this meat that is a korban shelemah, do I mean as the state that it was before the blood was sprinkled? From the time that I designated the korban, I made a vow, this I'm going to offer this lamb as a korban shelemah until the time I sprinkled the blood. That's prohibited to everyone. And is that what I mean with the previous state? We tried to give 3 responses to Rami Bar Chama. None of them worked. And now we're going to end off this topic with the last lema ketana'eh. Perhaps the 2 sides of this question is actually a machloket between 2 Tanaim. And here is the braita that we will compare it to. Hare alai kibechor. Rabbi Yaakov said, Rabbi Yehuda matir. If I have some bread or whatever, and I say, this will be upon me like a bechor animal. An animal that's a bechor is consecrated, it's holy, cannot use it, and you give it to the kohen. So if I say this bread will be prohibited like a bechor, does that work? Rabbi Yaakov says it's a binding vow and the bread is prohibited. Rabbi Yehuda says it's permitted. Now what kind of case are we talking about? If we're talking about before the blood of the firstborn is sprinkled, the firstborn becomes a sacrifice. And then if it's before the sprinkling of the blood, then the animal is prohibited. It is a korban. So therefore, why would anyone say it's permitted? So then it can't be that case, because Yehuda would never say it's permitted. And if we're talking about a case where the blood has sprinkled already, and now the meat of it is permitted to the kohen, in that case it's definitely permitted. So why would Rabbi Yaakov say that if at that point you say the bread will be like this bechor? Why would it be prohibited if you're comparing it to something that's permitted? So we can't understand this machloket in either case. Rather, it's not that a person says this language, but rather he takes the meat of an animal that what is a bechor, that you already sprinkled the blood and it's there in front of you, and you put the bread also next to it, and you say this bread should be like that. Here it's comparing piece of meat. You say this piece of meat should be like the other piece of meat. So does that work or not? Do we follow the current status or the previous status? And here we can this way we can understand the machloket. According to Rabbi Yaakov, it means that we're following the prior status, right? This new piece of meat is going to be like this bechor piece of meat was beforehand, and so that creates a prohibition. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says the second new piece of meat is like the current state of this bechor meat, which is permitted. And so you see, there we go. We see that these 2 Tanaim debate precisely the 2 sides of Rami Bar Chama's question. All right, so that would seem to be interesting, but not necessarily so. Lo tekula alma lifnei zirikat damim. In fact, everybody may very well, this machloket could between Tanaim is before you sprinkled the blood. And if so, why would you permit it? Amar kera ki yidor ad sheyidor bedavar hanadur lapuke bechor dedavar ha'asur hu. Because of the principle that we saw already yesterday, that when the pasuk says ki yidor, when one makes a vow, you have to compare this new item to something that you made a vow on. So if you say this item will be like a korban, like a korban nedava, korban todah, is something that I take upon myself as a vow, and that makes that animal prohibited as a vow. So if I say this bread will be prohibited to me like a korban, yes, that makes a vow. But a vow can only draw its efficacy from something else that's prohibited by a vow. And that comes to exclude something that is already prohibited from the Torah. Yeah, like yesterday we said, like pig. Now what is bechor? A bechor, from the moment it's born, it's already a prohibited item from the Torah. You don't have to wait to make a vow that to say I'm going to donate this bechor. It's already prohibited. And that's the reason for the opinion that says it's permitted. That's what Yehuda says it's permitted. So that's why. Okay, fine. Manda asar. Now, what about the one that prohibits Yaakov? Why would he prohibit it? If in fact it's something that's already prohibited from the Torah? Well, he'll go on to the next word in the pasuk. Amar kirad la Hashem ki yidor neder la Hashem lerabot avar ha'asur. The word la Hashem is coming to include something that's already forbidden in the Torah. It's not coming to include everything. All things are forbidden in Torah. So that's a basic principle that things like pig, and we discussed yesterday, pigul, notar, right? That you cannot make a vow upon. But this Hashem is including something, and that something that's including is a bechor. As we're going to see in a second, the Gemara is going to explain that bechor, even though it's born holy, also the correct practice is for the owner to also designate it. So since you are in addition designating it, it has a little bit of a vow aspect to it, and therefore that is also included. And yes, you can make a prohibition by a vow by comparing it to bechor. Okay, Uman Deshar, the one who permits La Hashem, my avid, what's he going to do with La Hashem? Has to include something. He could use La Hashem to include a different case. If someone says this bread will be prohibited like a hatat or like an asham. Now, hatat and asham are obligatory offerings. If someone sins by mistake, or and has to bring chatat, or does one of the things that for what you have to bring an asham, then those are obligatory. I might have thought that only a voluntary offering, there it's only because of my vow. I didn't have to bring a korban todah. I decided I want to bring one. So an olah, in that case, yes, if I say this is like an olah, this is like a shelamim, then they will make a vow. But I might have thought for chatat and Hashem, where I have to bring it, maybe not. So according to this opinion, Hashem is coming to include, even though, I have to bring a chatat, nevertheless, this particular animal, I could have brought any animal. So this particular animal, and the fact that I'm doing it now, is all based on a vow. So the prohibition of the animal is based on a vow, even if it's a chatat, even if it's an asham, and the word Hashem comes to include that. Okay, now we ask about on that opinion. Why would you include hatat and hasham and exclude bechor? So that if I say this bread is like a bechor, then it is not prohibited. All right? Why choose one over the other? Well, the answer is simple. It makes sense to include chatat and hasham that were permitted animals before I designated them, and only once I make a vow, I'm going to bring this animal as an asham. Only then it's prohibited, and it makes sense to exclude the firstborn that is holy from the moment it's born. And so, would it make sense that I can make bread holy by comparing it to a bechor if a bechor is not prohibited because of a vow? So really that makes perfect sense. So let's go back to the other opinion. Umanda asar bechor name matpiso beneder hu detanya mishum Rabbi Amiru minayin denolad bechor betoch beto shemitzvah lakdisho shnemar hazachar takdisho. The opinion that said is prohibited when I say this bread will be like a bechor. So he will say that actually bechor also, you do designate it with a vow, and it becomes prohibited because of the vow. How do we know that? This baraita, the B said, how do you know that a bechor that's born in the person's household, he owns it and is born, that there's a mitzvah to make it holy, because it says hazachar takadish. Yes, you should consecrate, even though it's born holy. Nevertheless, you're also making a vow. Since you're also making a vow, that's, yes, part of its prohibition is because of that vow, and therefore it makes sense that if I say this bread will be like the vow, this bread will be like the bechor, it does work because there is a vow built into the process of the bechor. And how about the one who permits it? Don't you agree that you make a vow? And he would say, yeah, generally you make a vow, even though it's born, that's part of the normal procedure, the correct procedure. But what if you didn't? Would it not be holy? It certainly would be holy. It still would be a prohibition of going ahead and using that animal or just slaughtering it and eating it. All right, it still is a sacrifice. So according to that opinion, all of its prohibition comes from its being born. The fact that you make a vow is just extra credit, but actually not necessary, and therefore the vow is it's not actually prohibited because of the vow, only because of the way it's born. The other opinion would say, yeah, it's born holy, but the vow also adds something to that prohibition, and therefore it can work. All right, so in the end, we see that the machloket in that baraita regarding the bechor is about a different thing. It's not about whether you go by the prior status of this item or by the current status. It has nothing to do with Rami Bar Chama, and so we have no answer to Rami Bar Chama. We don't even have a precedent for it. But instead, we do see that something interesting about bechor, that is born holy, but it may or may not have an added aspect of a prohibition based on a vow. All right, the next item in the Mishnah said, Ke'imra kadirim. If someone said that this bread will be like a lamb that's designated for an offering, or like the pen where we keep the animals, that does take effect, because it's you're comparing the bread to a korban. Good. Now we have a braita that elaborates on these cases. Tana, imra le'imra ke'imra. Point here is that whether you say just lamb without any prefix, or you do say a prefix to an imra, ke'imra, right? This bread will be like an imra. This bread to an imra. This bread a lamb. All those are effective. Dirim, la dirim, kadirim. Pans two pans like pans. Etzim, la etzim, kayesim. Firewood, to firewood, like firewood that's used for the altar. Ishim, la ishim, ka ishim. Fire itself, to the fire, like the fire that's on the altar. Mizbeach, la mizbeach, ka mizbeach. Anything regarding the altar. Hechal, la hechal, ka hechal. The sanctuary. Yerushalayim, li Yerushalayim, ki Yerushalayim. If I say this bread is Jerusalem, this bread to Jerusalem, this bread like Jerusalem, Jerusalem being something holy. Kulan she'ochal lecha asur lo ochal lecha mutar. In all of these formulas, if I say it with the positive, that I will eat, meaning whatever I will eat from you is prohibited like a lamb, or whatever I will eat from you is a mizbeach. Anything like that makes a prohibition. On the other hand, this is the main point of the braita. If I use a negative, what I do not eat from you is a lamb, is like a lamb. Well, then that does not create a prohibition, because all I said is that whatever I don't eat from you is prohibited, but I'm not eating that anyway. And so, therefore, that says nothing about what I will eat from you, and so that creates no prohibition. I have to say what I will eat from you, that's prohibited. That makes sense. What I will not eat from you, no matter what else I say, will not make it prohibition. All right, that's the braita. Now we ask, Man shamat le de la shani le imra ki imra Rabbi Meir. Who would be the opinion of this baraita that makes no distinction between imra le imra ki imra? It is in fact Rabbi Meir. The Mishnah does not actually say explicitly that Rabbi Meir is the one that makes no distinction between whether there is a prefix or not. But the next Mishnah we're about to learn, does say explicitly that Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with a Tanakama. So if Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, who's a Tanakama? Probably Rabbi Meir. And so Rabbi Yehuda is the one that is we're about to see, says that you have to have a prefix. You have to say this bread is like a korban. You can't just say this bread is a korban, because that sounds like you're actually making it of actual korban, which is not. You have to say like a korban, meaning like the prohibition of a korban. So Rabbi Yehuda says you have to have a prefix. Rabbi Meir is the one who says you don't have to have a prefix. Good. So now we know that this baraita follows the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Hold on, ve'ema sefa ve'chulan lo ochal lecha mutar. And the baraita said you have to use a positive statement that what I eat from you will be like the fire of the Mizbeach, then it's prohibited. But if I say what I will not eat from you is like a korban, then that's permitted. Now, v'hatanan lekorban lo ochal lecha, Rabbi Meir oser, ve'amar Rabbi Abba nasa ke'omer lekorban yehe, lefichach lo ochal lecha. However, in a Mishnah, this is also a Mishnah we're about to see, although we already quoted this whole statement, the Mishnah says, if a person says, as a korban, I will not eat from you. What I will not eat from you is like a korban. It's prohibited. Now, why would that be? If you say a negative statement, it's still prohibited. Rabbi Abba explained, because it's as if saying, le korban yeheh, whatever I eat from you will be prohibited like a korban. Therefore, lo ochal lecha. Therefore, I will not eat from you. I'm splitting it into two phrases. If I read it as one phrase, then it does not make a prohibition. Because if I say what I do not eat from you is prohibited like a korban, well, then it's only saying what I don't eat from you, and that's the whole point of the baraita here. I have to say in a positive way, what I do eat from you is like a korban. And so the Abba explains that it's prohibited because I split it into two. What I eat from you is like a korban, and therefore I will not eat from you. Okay, so now we have a contradiction, right? So we're going to parse it this way or parse it that way. The answer is la kashya hadamar la leimra hadamar leimra. If the baraita is talking about where I said not like an imra, I will not eat from you. That's what it was talking about here. So if I said what I will not eat from you is not like a sacrifice, meaning it's permitted. So what I will not eat from you is permitted. Now, for Rabbi Meir, I'm not going to derive from that what I do eat from you is prohibited, because Rabbi Meir does not learn a positive from a negative. We already saw that. So that's what the Braisa is talking about. Whereas the Mishnah, as we're about to see again, is where he said le imra or le korban. Then that does make a prohibition, because I separate that into two. As a korban, what I'm going to eat from you is a korban, and therefore lo achal lecha. So he says in short form, le korban. He's looking at the guy, le korban, implying everything I eat from you is korban, and therefore lo achal lecha. So it does make a difference if you make it two words or one word. All right, and now the Mishnah we've been waiting for. Haomer korban, ola, mincha, hatat, toda, shelamim. So all these words are languages of prohibition, because you're all made by vows. However, all of them, shani ochel lecha asur, you're going to have to say the positive statement that I eat from you. Anything I eat from you will be a korban, will be an ola, and so on. That makes a prohibition. Rabbi Yehuda matir. Rabbi Yehuda, however, says all these do not make a vow. The reason is, as we just mentioned, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you need a prefix. You have to say it's like a korban. If you just say this food, this bread is a korban, or what I eat from you is a korban, well, it doesn't actually make it. That sounds like I actually want to make it a korban, the type that's brought to the Bet HaMikdash and sacrificed. And so that does not make a vow of prohibition. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Tanakama, who is Rabbi Meir, says even the word by itself does make a prohibition. That's the first matter. Second matter, HaKorban, Ke Korban, She'ochal Lecha Asur, LeKorban, Lo Ochal Lecha, Rabbi Meir Oser. And the second point is the same as what we just learned in that longer Braita, that if you say any of this language with Heh Yediyah, the Korban, like a Korban, or just Korban by itself, if I say it in a positive way, that I will eat from you, whatever I eat from you will be a korban, like a korban, that makes a prohibition. But if I say a negative, what I do not eat from you will be like a korban or any of the other languages, then that that also makes a prohibition according to the Bimeir. So see, this is a line. This line is what we were just asking about, because this seems to be a contradiction. So we have to explain this line. How come if he says positive, that makes a prohibition? How come if he says a negative, that makes a prohibition? So then we're going to give the answer that we already give twice, but this is the original source of where it's from. Okay, let's see. Katani korban ha-korban ke-korban shocha lecha asur. So we're quoting this line here, the second statement. If he says a positive, shochal, whatever I eat, as a korban, that makes a prohibition. So we see that the stam, right, this is anonymous, this line, is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and he makes no distinction between with a prefix or without a prefix. Fine, but look at the next line. Rabbi Meir had the katani ha-korban shochal lecha asur. If that part of the Mishnah that you just quoted is in fact Rabbi Meir, that if you said this, whatever I eat from you is a korban, then that makes a prohibition. V'hatanya. But look at this next baraita. Mudim chachamim l'Rabbi Yehuda. Chachamim, that means including Rabbi Meir. Everyone agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. Be'omer ha korban veha ola veha mincha veha hatat sheochal lecha shemutar shelo nadar ze ela bechaye korban. Everyone agrees that if someone says this korban or this ola or this chatat, that I will eat from you, then that does not make a vow, because that sounds like he's saying by the life of the korban, right? Ha korban, that would be an introduction, like the king, by the life of the king. So you're just using it to begin a vow. You're not saying that the bread or what I eat from you is going to be prohibited like a korban. So this is not the language of a vow. So now we wonder what's going on here in the Mishnah. You said ha korban of what I eat from you will make a prohibition, whereas in this baraita everyone agrees, including Rabbi Meir, that ha korban does not make a vow. That is prohibited. So we answer la kashya hadamad ha korban. There's difference if you make it as two words or one word. The baraita, this last baraita, is when you said two words, ha korban, this korban that I will not eat from you. That is that's making. Just saying by the life of the korban. Veha de'amar ha-korban. Whereas the Mishnah he makes it one word, and ha-korban, whatever I eat from you will be ha-korban, will be prohibited. What he means is prohibited like the korban. My ta'ama chaya korban kama. When it's two words, then he's swearing by the life of the korban and not by the prohibition, not comparing the prohibition of the korban. Good. Katane la korban lo ochal lecha. Rabbi Meir oser. Now that last line of the Mishnah says, what I do not eat from you will be a korban. Rabbi Meir says that makes a prohibition. Why? Rabbi Meir said you do not derive a positive from a negative. This is only a negative statement. What I do not eat from you will be prohibited. So that doesn't say anything about what I will eat from you. Why should it make a prohibition? Amar Rabbi Abba nasa keomer le korban yeheh lefichach lo ochal lecha. Rabbi Abba says we parse this as two phrases. La korban. You're looking at the guy or at the bread and say la korban. This will be like a sacrifice. Therefore, lo ochal lecha. Therefore, I will not eat anything from you, and that's why he makes a prohibition according to the Rabbi Meir. Last Mishnah of the Perek. Ha'omer lechavero kunam pi medaber imecha yadi osa imecha ragli mehalechet imecha asur. Someone says to someone else kunam. That's the nickname for korban. The mouth that speaks to you. So he was saying is that I'm not going to speak to you anymore as a neder. So he says that like a korban, the mouth that speaks to you, or korban kunam, my hands that will do something, work with you. Therefore, he cannot work for him, do anything for him. Ragli mehalechet imecha korban, that my legs will walk to you. That means he's never going to walk over. All those do create a prohibition. All right, now we have a question on the Mishnah. Urminhu, Homer beshevuot min nedarim u'nedarim beshevuot. This is a very important braita. It says that shevuot and nedarim are different. In some ways, a shevuah is more stringent than a neder. In some ways, a neder is more stringent than a shevuah. The basic difference between them is that neder applies to the object and the shevuah applies to the person. And this has many consequences. Chomer b'nedarim shenedarim chalim ala mitzvah kebareshut, ma she'en ken b'shevuot. So the neder is more stringent in this way that it can apply to a matter of a mitzvah. If I say this sukkah will be prohibited to me, I'm making this sukkah like a korban, then I cannot go into the sukkah and I cannot fulfill my mitzvah thereby. That is a neder because it focuses on the object. I can make that neder. But if I say I will not go into that sukkah to fulfill the mitzvah, that does not work, all right? Because I cannot make a vow that will prohibit me from making a mitzvah. That point will be discussed further in Mishnah on Daf 16. But here, the second part is what we need. That chomer b'shevuot, she'shevuot chalot al davar sheyesh bo mamash v'she'en bo mamash, ma she'en ken b'nedarim. There's a stringency, there's a broader sweep for a shevuah, that a shevuah can apply to something that does not have substance, or something that does or does not have substance. Since it's about a person, so I'm taking upon myself, I can make a vow to do something, not do something, even to exercise, even though there's no object there. That's not true regarding nedarim. Nedarim has to apply to an object. That's the definition of a neder, that this item will be prohibited to me. Food that you have will be prohibited to me. It can't just be an activity or an idea. Okay, so that's the difference between them. Now this is a question, because if a person here makes a konam and is using the language of a neder, that I won't speak to you, or I won't do work for, I'm not going to walk over to you. So these are all matters that are not substance. How can you make a neder regarding a speech? So that's the question. The answer is Amar Rav Yehuda be'omer ye'aser pi lediburi yadai lema'asehem raglai lehiluchan. The Mishnah is talking about a case where he says a formula that actually specifies something that is an actual object. He says my mouth should be prohibited for its speech. My mouth should be forbidden with regard to my speech. My hands will be forbidden regarding their work, or my legs regarding walking. So here, the object of the neder is actually a part of his body that he's not going to use for the benefit of the other person. That's why it does work. But you're right, if he does use the language of, I'm not going to speak to you, my work will not be for your benefit, then that is not a physical object, and you could not say a neder regarding that. Good, and we prove that Rav Yehuda is correct. Aikaname tekatani pi medaber imecha velo katani she'ani medaber imecha. Notice the Mishnah says, like a korban, it says mouth. It does specify the mouth that will speak to you. And so you see, it does say that mouth, and it does not say korban, I will not speak to you. If you just said that, it would not be effective. You could make a vow, shevuah, that I'm not going to speak to you. Yeah, shevuah can go on the person and upon any action that he will do or won't do. But if it's like a neder, ke korban, then it does have to go on an object. So that's a really important principle. And with that, we complete the first perek, Hazran Alach Kol Kinuyeh.